Buddhist cosmology, the wheel of life spins ceaselessly through 6 realms, each representing a distinct mode of existence. Among them, the realm of hungry ghosts stands as a haunting metaphor for the insatiable cravings of addiction. In this realm, spectral beings wander endlessly, their swollen bellies crying out for nourishment. Yet their thin necks and small mouths prevent them from ever feeling satisfied. They consume, they ingest, they grasp at anything that might quell the hunger gnawing at them from within, but the relief they seek remains ever out of reach. The suffering of the hungry ghost is not merely physical, it is existential. Gabor Mate, in his book In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, explores how addiction mirrors this condition, revealing that it is not the object of addiction that truly matters, but the perpetual cycle of seeking and despair. False needs, no matter how often fulfilled, never bring true relief. The brain, trapped in its desperate longing, is unable to find peace. It is as if a starving man were to feast endlessly, only to find himself just as hungry as before, locked in a never-ending pursuit of an unattainable satiety. Mate offers a definition of addiction that extends beyond the traditional notions of substance dependence. Addiction, he explains, is any repetitive behavior that a person feels compelled to continue, even when it causes harm to themselves or others. While substance abuse is the most visible and widely recognized form of addiction, it is far from the only one. The compulsive pull of gambling, pornography, social media, video games, shopping, sex, and even work can become just as consuming. What differentiates a passion from an addiction is not the nature of the activity itself, but the loss of control. When a person can no longer dictate their relationship with a behavior, when they are driven by an unrelenting compulsion despite the damage it inflicts, addiction has taken hold. To assess whether addiction is present, one might pose a simple yet revealing question. Knowing the harm it causes, would you stop if you could? If the answer is no, the behavior has likely crossed into addiction. When promises to quit are made only to be broken time and again, when willpower is rendered powerless against an internal force that overrides rational thought, one is no longer merely engaging in a habit, they are trapped in an addiction's grip. The origins of addiction have been fiercely debated for decades. Some have sought to frame it as an inherent moral failing, a flaw in character, or a simple lack of willpower. Others have pointed to genetics as the determining factor. Yet a more nuanced understanding reveals that addiction is the result of a complex interplay between personal vulnerability and external influences. Addiction flourishes when an individual persistently seeks to alter their internal state, using a substance or behavior as a means of escape, relief, or self-soothing. Natasha Schull, in her work Addiction by Design, explores the dual nature of addiction. While some individuals are more susceptible than others, certain substances and activities possess an inherently addictive structure. Their potency lies in their ability to provide immediate and compelling shifts in consciousness, a transformation that some come to rely on as their primary means of coping with emotional distress. This sheds light on why certain addictions, whether to drugs, gambling, or social media, are more widespread and difficult to break than others. Yet addiction is not simply about the external object. It is equally, if not more so, about the individual's internal state. What makes some more vulnerable to addiction than others? Mate, through his work with addicts, has observed that addiction is nearly always rooted in pain. It is not a pursuit of pleasure, but an attempt to escape suffering. Whether the suffering stems from unresolved trauma, loneliness, anxiety, depression, or a profound sense of emptiness, addiction becomes a means of numbing, distracting, or temporarily silencing the internal turmoil. A man who has struggled with substance abuse for decades may not even fully understand why he continues to use. When Mate asked one such individual why he persisted in his addiction, the answer was revealing in its simplicity. I don't know. I'm just trying to fill a void in my life. In many cases, the roots of addiction can be traced back to childhood. Studies have consistently shown that a significant percentage of hard drug users grew up in abusive or neglectful environments. Carl Jung once remarked that all parental difficulties leave lasting imprints on a child's psyche, sometimes with pathological consequences. The influence of one's upbringing cannot be overstated. Just as an infant is entirely dependent on its mother for physical nourishment, a young child relies on their caregivers for emotional and psychological security. When this foundation is unstable, when a child is subjected to emotional neglect, abuse, or persistent stress, their developing brain is altered in ways that increase susceptibility to addiction later in life. Mate explains that many addicts use substances to self-medicate, attempting to soothe pain that originated long before their first encounter with drugs. But addiction is not simply a psychological response. It is also a biological one. The dopamine and opioid systems, the emotional centers of the brain, the stress response mechanisms, and the regions responsible for impulse control all fail to develop optimally under the weight of childhood trauma. These neurological deficiencies leave an individual more vulnerable to addiction, making it far more difficult for them to regulate emotions or resist compulsions. Yet trauma does not always come in overtly abusive forms. Children raised in environments where parents were physically present but emotionally absent, perhaps due to stress, depression, or their own unresolved wounds, can also develop addiction-prone patterns. This phenomenon, described by psychologist Alan Shore as proximal separation, highlights the deep emotional impact of an unresponsive caregiver. A child naturally seeks emotional attunement from their parents. When this need is met with indifference, inconsistency, or rejection, they develop coping mechanisms to compensate for the lack of connection. Rocking, thumb-sucking, emotional withdrawal. These are early adaptations that, in adulthood, may evolve into addictions as the individual seeks external sources of comfort and regulation. Even those with stable childhoods are not immune. The modern world itself fosters addiction, offering countless ways to numb, distract, and escape. The pressures of contemporary life, consumerism, the rapid pace of technology, the fragmentation of community, have created an environment in which addiction flourishes. Much like the citizens of Rome who turned to hedonism as their empire crumbled, many today seek solace in substances and behaviors that provide temporary relief from a world that often feels overwhelming, alienating, and devoid of deeper meaning. Mate observes that a pervasive sense of emptiness runs through our culture. The addict, in many ways, is simply more acutely aware of it than most. Many who never fall into full-blown addiction still engage in compulsive behaviors to avoid confronting the deeper void within. Our society encourages consumption. Overcoming addiction in all its forms provides momentary relief but deepens suffering in the long run. The path to recovery is not merely about abstaining from a substance or behavior. It is about fundamentally shifting one's relationship with oneself. It requires recognizing that addiction is not a failure of willpower, but a complex entanglement of pain, neurobiology, and coping mechanisms. True healing involves uncovering the wounds that led to addiction in the first place and finding new ways to soothe them. While the journey is arduous and relapse is often part of the process, freedom is possible. With self-awareness, support, and a reconnection to life's deeper meanings, even those who have long been trapped in addiction can rediscover a sense of wholeness and inner peace.
Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, leave a like and a subscription. If you could keep listening to the video until now, congratulations. You are a warrior who have the capacity of bringing attention for a long time. Leave a comment saying this: I'm brave. Then you will let people know that you have the brave to improve your life quality, and you'll try to be better each day. Now bye until the next video. A big hug from the being of knowledge.